I'm Paul Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and this week I'm joined by Spencer Jones, founder of XO Medtech. Thanks for joining us today, Spencer.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe to start right in, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in medtech.
Yeah, so I've got a little. I feel like it's unique in some ways, and then like very traditional in some other ways. Started off as a registered nurse. Thought I wanted to do anesthesia. It's what my dad did growing up, and then patented some vascular access devices when I was at the bedside. And it was just kind of that classic. Hey, these what I'm dealing with right now, this problem. I wish it could get better. Why isn't this better? Did some tinkering, did some drawing, did some patent research, and then ended up founding what's now Lineus Medical. Did the venture capital, angel capital thing over about 7.5 years. It took us about 5 years to get the product on the market, but launched that product called SafeBreak Vascular, and then moved over to the laparoscopic surgical side, and then started doing some consulting as well, orthopedic, like hip and spine. And yeah, so that was kind of my journey. It was honestly like very influenced by accelerator programs. Maybe that's one kind of key piece of the journey. I was able to do like 2 within the first real like year of, I would say, my entrepreneurial journey. And those were huge. The first one was like not med device specific, but it was still great for a lot of the fundamentals. And then the second one, 0 to 510, was medical device specific. And it's a great program. Their cohort just had their demo day, but that one was game changer. And that was when I kind of like quit my job, hung up the scrubs, and then moved into entrepreneurship full time.
Yeah, and I mean, you've mentioned that you're at different points in your career, which have probably shaped a lot the types of businesses you are running today, which are different things at the same time. You still have your medical device company, but you've also launched XO Medtech, about which we are going to talk today mostly. I can imagine those different things constantly cross-pollinate each other in terms of having ideas on that side and then using it for maybe content on the XO Medtech side and so on. Going back to your career as a practitioner early on, probably also influencing the way you talk to practitioners today through your medical device business and so on. Would you say having those different angles has supported you along the way, or has it also sometimes been hindering you, or what's your resume about that?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think it's mostly helped. There are some ways that it's hindered. I'll start with like the ways that it's helped. I mean, nurses are kind of designed and trained to be problem solvers, right? You have a patient, you're given a set of facts, a problem to solve, their vitals, their history, current medications, all of those things. So like nurses are naturally kind of self-starting problem solvers. You get to your, and each day is kind of a new startup, like, right? You've got 5 patients, you have to manage the criticality of each and all of these things. So I think in a lot of those ways that like bias to action, thinking quickly on your feet, moving quickly, managing kind of like spinning different plates, like all of those things set you up to be, I think, like naturally suited to be an entrepreneur, or at least like, succeed and have some qualities that help you become a good entrepreneur. I would say in some of the ways that it hindered are I would say early on, like I didn't feel like I belonged. Like I feel like, the whole just a nurse thing, it was a little bit of like imposter syndrome that really progressed for a while just because you're kind of low man on the totem pole at the hospital in a lot of ways. So like that was something that was a little bit of a hindrance. But then I think also I'm a pretty extroverted person, but sometimes, and I've struggled with it, but I see a lot of other nurses struggle with this too. It's just like kind of doing those like outside sales and like truly selling, because you're just never selling when you're a nurse to a degree, like you're educating. And so like the consultative sale is what I gravitated towards. But sometimes like just like cold calling and really hammering it and walking up to the doctor's office clinic desk and being like, hey, I need to get back there and see the doctor. Like those are just things that were like uncomfortable to me as a nurse. And I know that other nurses I've talked to kind of has struggled with that like bulldog sales mentality. So I think, in ways it did help and it hurt, but I definitely draw on the clinical knowledge all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how valuable it is to be when someone's like, talking about even just the clinical terminology, right? Just really understanding that, or being able to like, especially as a consultant, to be like, hey, I'm coming into this project that's related to spine, and you're talking about the nerve root and the end plates and the annulus and all of these different things. And I'm like, yeah, I got it. I don't have to do this kind of remediation on the clinical, pathophysiology of these diseases. So that's super valuable.
I mean, you mentioning those different sales techniques, I just wanted to respond to that. I mean, the bulldog sales mentality you were describing, I mean, you also don't have to have that, right? So it's not that you have to master all different variants of the sales playbook. Being really good at one type and building trust with your customers over time can be much better than being 90% in different types of that.
Yeah.
But maybe before we dive deeper into medical sales and your experience with that, let's maybe focus a little bit on XO Medtech at the beginning. XO Medtech is multiple things, right? So it's a business you started most recently. It's a community, but it's also a knowledge database. I think it's actually the prettiest database I've seen in medtech. I think you need to talk about that a little bit later. You've spent a lot of time actually building a content database which is visually appealing and describes problems really well. And maybe it's even more than the community part and the knowledge part. How would you explain to a layperson what XO Medtech is?
Yeah, it's pretty new and unique in terms of kind of like what we're trying to do, and I would say new and unique to medtech. There's some other places that exist, but in some, XO Medtech is a community based network and training platform for medtech innovators. And I know some people may hear that and say like, community based network and training platform. That sounds like gobbledygook, but really what it is, it's kind of a closed private community, right? Like it's a membership based model, so you join on like an annual membership model. But once you're inside the community, you have access to kind of the entire membership. So we went over 100 launched in June, went over 100 members back in November. So the growth has been pretty good. But once you get in there, you have access to downloadable tools, templates, guides, databases, right? You have access to the members. You can DM members, right? You can see kind of their profile, what they do, what they're looking for. We have live events, workshops, AMAs, pitch events. But I think kind of the keystone piece, and this is what we built for 18 months before we launched it, is the playbook. And the playbook is, we call it the MBA for MedTech innovation. Goes really from the fundamental building blocks of like, are you solving a real problem? How do you quantify that? How do you scope the market and really assess the financial impact as well as kind of the clinical outcomes and clinical prevalence of the problem that you're solving, all the way through regulatory, IP, prototyping, quality management, regulatory strategy and reimbursement, manufacturing, advanced testing, all the way through capital strategy, raising money, building a pitch deck, building your sales and distribution model and all the things. So we really designed it to be, whether you're from at the ideation stage or your, seed series A stage, or you're like working with a company that's in that stage, or an early, co-founder, an early employee, or a mentor, or a consultant, or it's kind of like this, almost like a safe space accountability group where you can ask dumb questions, right? And lean on people and get advice and get help. So it's truly a unique thing. And I think last point here, and you kind of called it out a little bit, but one thing that we really, gave an incredible amount of intentionality to was the design, the form factor, the user interface, so that whenever you're in there engaging with the content and like going through the playbook, it feels like you're binging Netflix. You can do it asynchronous. It's bite-sized chunks. The lessons aren't, you're not watching someone present a PowerPoint for an hour and a half. And that was just very intentional, because a lot of medtech innovators, you got to meet them where they are. A lot of them are still working full-time jobs, or they're just very busy people. And we just knew, recreating the biodesign textbook on a screen was just not going to work. So custom infographics and video walkthroughs, and always trying to break up text with something visually engaging to communicate concepts. And the branding, like everything's branded really nicely, so it feels clean. So I'd say that's, one key differentiating factor about what we're doing is kind of the how we're doing it.
So with that community and knowledge base, with that playbook you've built, the key audience are medtech innovators, right? So people ideating, having started a new medtech business, and trying to navigate through all the different hurdles and pitfalls along the way. And they can basically use XO Medtech to, on the one hand side, avoid those mistakes other people have done multiple times in the past, so they don't fall in the same pitfalls, but also if there's something more bespoke, reach out to the community and ask for help, ask for advice. Yeah. Is that a good description of that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, but even people, we've got a couple people in there that are CEOs of, Series A stage companies that are either, getting ready for the FDA or have their market or their device on the market for like 2 years now, right? And they still are getting got a tremendous amount of value from the playbook, and then there's still, immense value to get out of like the network side. But I think one, a lot of our community members have basically come to the platform through these like enterprise customers. So university innovation departments or B schools or accelerators or med schools, like a lot of, those are kind of one-to-many relationships where if somebody's doing medtech innovation, they're probably going to be attached to one of those organizations a lot of the times. And so we've seen some good growth there because it's very hard to teach this stuff. The content that exists out there is just not great for it. But then also it's like, even if you have, the actual physical act of teaching it can be difficult as well. So like, this is kind of an easy button in a way for them to say like, hey, if there's somebody within our organization, whether we're an accelerator that needs kind of backbone curriculum, or you're at a hospital innovation department that is like only has 2 or 3 people. So if you're trying to field all of these innovators and put them, you're just handing them one-off resources. So we've kind of seen XO be like an easy button where somebody comes to them with an innovation. It really doesn't matter what stage in that kind of ideation to Series A, like they can kind of put them in this jet stream. They've got access to more mentors, more network, more resources, more content, training, and education. And the people that have used it, those enterprise customers, have had like awesome feedback, and it's been really valuable for them.
You mentioned accelerator programs now a few times. You were yourself part of that. You now have accelerator program members as members of your platform. Is XO Medtech something you would have liked a few years ago when you were in that position? Was that what inspired you, or where did the inspiration for building that company come from?
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely is. We kind of built it because it's like what I wish I would have had 10 years ago, frankly. I'm based out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. I could drive 50 miles and only find a handful of people that are doing anything related to medtech. You know what I mean? So specifically on the network side, network and community, like I had to like uproot my life and move to Memphis, right, to get access to a medtech network. So absolutely, like that was a big part of it, and of building, launching, creating XO, launching the company. But I really do think like, me and my co-founder, we really just saw like a huge gap in the market and a need. I love medtech. Like it's such a big part of my life, and I love it so much, but there are so many parts of it that are just like bad or broken or that need to be fixed. We could talk about that all day, but I think we both would just like really love medtech, but saw massive gaps, especially in the innovation ecosystem and kind of what tools and resources and networks that innovators had access to, specifically if you're like not in Boston or South Florida or San Diego, right? Because if you're in one of those places, you can find any number of people to go buy coffee that are doing med tech stuff, right? But if you're in the, where the vast majority of people are, which is not one of those hubs, it's just really difficult. So we just saw a huge gap: content, community, network, training, and really just wanted to fill it and thought we could do a good job filling it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That we also see that with a lot of our international users of Alpha Sophia, that they use our platform quite a lot to just get a better understanding of the US provider universe and how they segment, how they fall into different groups, who's doing what, doing which procedures, doing which prescriptions, and so on. And then being able, even though they might have their company located in Europe, in Israel, in Taiwan, in Japan, somewhere across the world, to still be able to start getting in touch with healthcare practitioners in the US to show their product to them, raise interest and awareness, and then eventually launch on that very valuable but also very complex healthcare market in the US.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's, and for everybody in the audience, I've been an Alpha Sophia customer for a while, and like it's an amazing platform, but I think there's a parallel I want to try to draw where it's like, are there parts of data on Alpha Sophia, like the vast majority of it you couldn't even find online if you wanted to, but like, can you find where a doctor works? Yes, you can find that, right? Can you find other people that work there? But the granularity, the accuracy of the information, the ancillary information around it, procedural volumes, like there's so many other things that you can't find online that you've consolidated, organized, and presented in a way that is just most actionable, right, for these companies. I think in like completely different topic, but but XO's trying to do the same thing. People are like, can't you just find this stuff online? I'm like, you could spend hours and hours Googling. You can get a lot of the wrong pieces of the puzzle to the wrong puzzle, even, you know what I mean? So I think it's kind of the consolidation, the curation, the real world case studies and examples and the tools and the templates and resources. So like, I think like the aggregation and consolidation of all that intelligence, even though it's not data in the same way Alpha Sophia is, I think like, it's a similar thing, right? And you're allowing these international innovators to really, get access to this network in the U.S., right, and explore commercial opportunities in the U.S. So,
I think you're completely right. There's quite a big parallel between both. I mean, you're providing bespoke and also always up-to-date information on everything you need to know when you embark on that medtech innovation journey as a founder in that field. And I mean, also recency also plays a big role in your business, where things on the regulatory side change, market dynamics change, approaches to launching change. You might have gone a different route a few years ago. Now you're doing the other way around, and so on. So I think the internet is great, but things outdate quite quickly, and they still remain on there, and you might fall into the trap of relying on something which is not relevant anymore.
No, that's so true. I mean, I think we, in an attention economy, right, especially with like the prevalence of AI and how much it's growing, like there is so much noise out there that it is like deafening, right? So I think that's one reason why kind of like the niche community model, where you have like a more of a closed private niche community like we have with XO, like that is going to win, because it's such a high trust environment where we can do the heavy lifting of kind of watching the market and curating and consolidating the content that's like, and kind of communicating, hey, here's what you need to know. And that's what we're trying to do. I didn't, really mention this with, in that lead in, but a lot of what we do, and probably like a lot of like whatever, if anybody's seen anything on XO, it's just been content, right? It's been podcast clips or, research type posts, or just kind of commentary and analysis on, like you said, current events, if you will, right, in regulatory, FDA stuff. So I think that's a huge part of what we're trying to do, is build the brand out to be like a really high trust, high authority, source for information on medtech. We talk about the capital markets and the fundraising climate, and investor relations a lot, because that's just a hot button topic right now in medtech. So I think that's kind of a big part. And it on the outside, you may think it's like all we're doing if you're just looking from the outside in, but it's just really a part of our kind of like growth strategy and outreach strategy. But it's also something I really enjoy doing, is just meeting new people, really staying up to date, learning new things. And then like XO is a great kind of outlet also to say like, hey, here's like the 3 most, important things I saw this week that you need to know about. Yeah.
And in terms of, you mentioned that high authority content platform, in terms of data information curation, are the information also crowdsourced from your community, or is it an editorial process of your team preparing, quality assuring the content? How's it being conducted?
Yeah, it's a great question. So anything that is like a lesson, whether it's like our playbook or like a deep dive module that we do with some of our founding partners, all of that is like highly controlled, kind of quality controlled and curated. and combed over by, a number of people, kind of experts, just to kind of like verify the quality on that. Just the general posts, in the community, which if people are trying to kind of visualize this almost like a private Discord, right, where it's just like there's specific threads, but then those kind of consolidate into like a home feed. All of those are like community generated, right? We have very clear, I wouldn't say they're complex or like overly strict, but we have very clear community guidelines on like no spamming, no just like naked promotion. We want it to be a massive exchange of value. That's like the biggest thing. So, but if you found something valuable, like throw it in there, right? Like if someone wants to make a statement, they're like, I think this is, I think 2 + 2 is 5. Like we want people to be like, man, no, it's not. And here's why it's not, right? Because that engagement back and forth is kind of part of the beauty. Because like a lot of people are just going to be a fly on a wall. They may not engage that much, but like seeing someone say, hey, is this right? No, I think this right's, here's why. And then the dialogue around that is like very valuable. And it's something that's just kind of like hard to get anywhere other than like a private high trust like community, if you know what I mean. But we have like newsletter scrapers set up to help consolidate data to like make sure that we like are not missing topics. Like we are doing a lot of things to try to keep kind of that, because you have to work to keep it kind of that high trust, high authority. Like it's not just something that you just like have.
It's not like a book you write once and then put it in the shelf. It's a you continuously need to update it, add new stuff to stay relevant and up to date. In terms of the commercial part of a medtech innovator's journey, and you've gone through that on your own with your medtech startups. What would you say are the 3 biggest challenges for a medtech innovator to finding and then addressing and actually getting time with those initial doctors who could be users of a medtech solution?
Oh, that's a great question. So the most challenging bits of that, I think there's kind of a limbo. I'll say the first one, and I'm kind of going in chronological order relative to the product launch, right? So I think one of the first ones that's tough is like you may have like kind of picked out in theory or have an idea of like what you want your sales and distribution model to be, but there are a lot of distributors. And whenever I say distributor, I'm thinking kind of like distribution groups. If you're hiring W-2 reps, and which I can talk about that in a second, but that it's kind of a different set of issues. But a lot of people are leveraging either 1099s or distributor groups, regional distributor groups. So like finding them and vetting them early can be a bit of a challenge, right? Because they're naturally salespeople and you're going to probably like them after you have a call with them. So that's just a kind of an arduous process. But then also it's hard to get those types of groups to commit to you prior to having FDA clearance. So, but if you wait too long or really don't get things buttoned up, then you can have this process of like, okay, now we have FDA clearance. Now we have to like execute all of these agreements, and then we go and train them on sales. And like, you're kind of like at least 3 months behind, kind of out of the gate. You're already like a 3-month delay on getting your sales and distribution folks off the ground. So I'd say that kind of like trying to make that process efficient, vet them quickly, try to get them to like engage so that you can kind of like the week after, be flying out to train, or maybe even train them before, right? If they're willing to do that. Like those 3 to 6 months right after the product launch are so critical. They're just so critical. So like, I think that's a big challenge, right? I'd say 2 is, and I've had product launches where we did a good job with this, and I've had some where we did less than great job. But really focusing your sales reps' time and energy, because I think like people have, I think we've talked about this before. Like people have a tendency to want to just like pad the stats, get as many top of the funnel leads as they can, right? And just like be able to go into that investor meeting and be like, well, it's early in the product launch. We've got 100 people in the funnel here. We'll push those through. But it's like, how many reps do you have divided by how many people are in your funnel is like right, and how much time they're going to give you a day. You just have to go deep before you go wide. But it's like kind of, and it feels counterintuitive. But I think that's another challenge, is trying to make sure that you're going deep and really focus on your customers that are your ideal customer profile, right? And focus on those people, focus your reps' time on those people, and kind of avoid the urge to say like, yeah, like here's 50 people, go nuts, right? Say like, hey, here's the 2 facilities, or here's the 5 docs. I want you to be every time you're spending time on our stuff, I want you to be going in there. And there's a little bit of like you don't own those employees a lot of the times, right? Like distributor groups are 1099. So like you're really fighting for their time. So I think, just focusing and targeting them is difficult. And I wish I would have had Alpha Sophia when I was going through the initial product launch. But I'd say too, or the last one is, and I think this is more like direct sale. I'll kind of, the last one was distributor, or one of the last ones was distributor focused. This will be like direct sales focused. So like really knowing how to work an account. And what I mean by that is like, even if you're coaching your sales reps, or you're coaching your W-2s, or doing it on, feet on the street yourself, and you're covering accounts, like really understanding the relationship between, okay, I've got this surgeon, but I've got the executive assistant or admin at their clinic, and then there's the director of clinical operations at the surgery, at the big house, right, the where they're doing the surgery, and then you've got materials management, and then you've got the surgery scheduler. And at what point in the sales process do you communicate and lean on which person? And right, like, so it's, people think like, oh, like I just need to go talk to the surgeon. Like, no, you can go and have a sales call and talk to 4 people, and none of them are the surgeon, and it be wildly successful. But I think like really understanding how to do that, how to train and coach to that, and then having a diligent process about kind of mapping the stakeholders, and like executing on a strategy that touches on the right people at the right points in time, kind of in the right way, asking for the right things. That's very difficult. It's like you're spinning plates, right? You're playing an orchestra with all these different stakeholders, but that's very challenging as well.
How many hours a week are your reps driving to the wrong targets? How many minutes a week are they researching information online about their leads to better personalize their outreach? Look, I don't know what the return on investment is going to be for you using Alpha Sophia, but I know it's going to be very, very high. Visit us now, alphasophia.com, and let's start that calculation together.
Yeah, I can imagine it's always the difficulty of aligning all the stars of different stakeholders to not only have your one champion, but also bring everyone else into the discussion and make them enthusiastic about the product as well, to actually then make that sale down the road. When it comes to trends in medtech sales in general, is there anything you are seeing? I mean, there's a lot of discussion going on about more omni-channel outreach, also creating touch points with clinical personnel through social media, through LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. Is that something you're seeing as well, or what are your thoughts on that?
A couple on that piece. I mean, I'd say one, and this is, I'd say this to anybody, but I think the people that I see winning are the people that are using like intelligent data software like Alpha Sophia, like frankly, because like you cannot segment the market in a way that is like it specifically targets your ideal customer profile unless you have something like Alpha Sophia, right? Like and so the ability to segment that market, really dissect it and attack it. I feel like the people that are winning, you'll talk to people that are frustrated about sales, and I'll ask them like, how are you segmenting your market? Like, what data points are you using to decide who to go after and where to spend your time? And the answer is not satisfactory if they're not using anything like that. So I'd say that's one. I'd say two, on the sales side. I mean, the hospitals just want to see, more value, more features, more benefits for the same price or less. That didn't used to be that way. You could try to diagnose it exactly why it is that way, and it's something different everywhere. I'm sure, hospital ownership, physicians are now more hospital owned, so they have less kind of like sway. Budgets are getting cut, inflation, all of the things. But I think there's just been that kind of fundamental shift of like, you used to be able to get, if the surgeon really wanted it and the hospital, and it was only a little bit more expensive, the hospital would usually go for it. It just doesn't feel like that's the case anymore, to be frank. So I think that's trying to really achieve, closer to price parity, or really having an innovation that can like drive additional revenues through an alternate service line or kind of new reimbursement code. And I'll use like Sonovex as an example. I just interviewed David Narrow. They've got this incredibly advanced, ultrasound technology that uses machine learning and a echogenic resorbable that goes underneath an AV fistula to help with the assessment of maturation. But like, you're talking about making a patient less reliant on their central venous catheter. They can assess basically it decreases the cost of end-stage renal disease and caring for those patients. And like, we spend so much money on that. So maybe this was a long way to get to another, like to kind of another trend of like building something that, yes, the users need to like it, right? The surgeons, the nurses, it needs to provide value to them, and it needs to provide clinical value to the patient. But like, more than ever, just like making sure there is a strong economic story and value proposition that you can tell to the facility, but like almost, in a lot of ways, the insurance provider as well. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you're spending a ton of money on these patients because they're readmitting and all of this stuff. We can help you kind of cut that, right? And it may feel no different to the nurse or the surgeons, but it is an economically focused value proposition for both the facility and the payer. I think you're seeing the companies that are doing that well, they're winning. You know what I mean? They're winning.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's also what we are seeing with many of our customers currently in the market. Maybe on a higher level, are there any other trends you're currently seeing in medtech, especially with new innovations coming up, either on the product side or through new business models attached to that? Is there anything where you say the next few years that's the hot topic on every startup investor conference, and the hot startups are doubling down on those topics? You already mentioned the one about the business model, which proves an economic advantage to the healthcare system, who's the ultimate buyer. But maybe there are other things you are seeing.
Yeah, I think energy delivery balloon catheters. There's just been a ton of positive activity around that. I think there's I was talking to Steve Maxon the other day and was asking him like, has there been like some like quantum leap in like whenever Apple started making their own M1 chips and M2 chips, it feels like their computers just got way faster. I was like, is there anything that happened like that in catheter extruding technology? And they're able to do some things with lithotripsy, cryoablation, pulse wave ultrasound that's just like can like decalcify arteries. So they're doing some really incredible and amazing stuff. So I think that entire energy delivery balloon catheter market is really hot and going to stay pretty hot for a while. That's one. I truly think, and this is like less hardware focused, but I really think there's some good opportunity around specifically like prior authorizations, and like I see just like a massive application for using artificial intelligence in kind of that like back office prior authorization, like, because I'm just pretty bullish that like if you can use AI to like objectively say that like one prior authorization request is like 99% similar to the other one, like I don't know how the insurance company can say like we have any basis to deny or delay this. You see what I'm saying? So like I really think there's some like opportunities to disrupt that industry. And there's already some companies doing it on like the medical coding and billing side, where they're using AI to basically scrape patient notes plus the patient's file and make sure that the physician is billing and coding that visit kind of to maximize reimbursement. So there's some people that are doing it really well. There's actually one company out of Little Rock. But I'd say, so like energy delivery balloons, I think the robotics piece is really interesting. I mean, the laparoscopic surgical robots have been so intimately involved in every part of the surgical procedure. And then you move kind of like shift a gear over to orthopedics, and like with hips and knees, they're doing a ton of really good work, right? But kind of it's a fundamentally a different kind of like modality compared to like these arms that are inside the patient in the laparoscopic, abdominal procedure. But I think the surgical robotic market, there's a lot of players. It's like the big guys have theirs, and then there's a lot of mid-market players that are developing theirs. So I'm curious to see how that arms race pans out. I'm curious to see what feature sets they're going to be competing on, right? Is it like people have like unique ablation end effectors or specific end effectors that are allowing them to do specific procedures and things like that? Or is it going to like all of a sudden be a cost race? Like I'm really truly curious, like what the differentiating factor is in a year or so. But that the robotic space is really hot. It's heating up.
And it's also
I'd say
interesting.
those are probably the
also
three.
regarding the robotics piece, it's also interesting to see which models are succeeding in the end. I mean, there are some players building their own robot from bottom up, yeah, and then there are others who are relying on a platform and then modifying on top of that. So there are different ways of playing that also on the product development side. So yeah, also quite excited about that.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, like I was doing like I was for a due diligence, like a data room, I was doing like an analysis on a lot of the spine robots in the space. And I think, you got your mid-market, your big players, but you're totally right, Paul. There is like a huge chunk of like robot OEMs. And they're like, you go to their website and they're like, we have medical robots. We have supply chain, warehouse robots, have all these different things. And then like, there's some places where it's like, the early stage robot companies, you can look and like you can see that OEM's like logo still on the robot.
It's on there.
And it's, but I if I was like trying to build a robot company and a lot of like the secret sauce is in the navigation and the end effectors, right? Like, why would you build your own robot arm if there's ones that work really well? Like, it's just so risky and such a massive hardware development expense.
Yeah, it also makes sense, to build on I mean, just from a global perspective, it doesn't make sense if the same thing is being developed in silos yet again and again and again. It's much more efficient if some specialize on the platform than others, customize on top of that for different therapeutic areas and different procedures. I can still, sorry.
I was going to say, that's what the Velis robot, I think J&J acquired them, but that was almost like outsourced R&D, I'm pretty sure, right? Like, and they ended up, I think it's a French company. But yeah, so I mean, if there's a lot of like value to doing it that way, right? Sorry, I cut you off a little bit. What were you going to say, Paul?
Yeah, just regarding the robot piece, I think I've visited a surgeon training facility of Intuitive a couple of years ago, and the first time, I mean, you can see it on pictures, you can also see it in an exhibition hall, but it's something different when you actually see it in action. And it's just mind-blowing to see those masterworks of technology in action,
You should check out Arthrex. So they're really orthopedic sports meds. They do some incredible stuff. They're a private company, but it's called Studio X, I'm pretty sure, down in Naples, Florida, I want to say. But it's like basically like a Hollywood movie studio quality, like huge studio with like cadaver labs, and then they have these like digital kind of like massive like digital environments where like you can have a surgeon in there, and it's the content they produce. Like, I don't know who's on the Arthrex marketing team. I hope they hear this, but like, you deserve a raise. Like, all the stuff that you're doing is incredible. Every time I see a piece of their marketing, I just love it. Plus their branding's black and white. So I know you and I both love that, but anyways, you should check that out if you like, if you like that, kind of seeing the robots and kind of those demonstrations, like the Arthrex Studio X thing is awesome.
Maybe going one step back, if you're a new medtech innovator, you maybe worked in a clinical role, or you've come from the business side, or you're an experienced medtech veteran who wants to build their own company, and you start off and you secure maybe first friends and family round, and then you want to get first institutional money at some point in the company. And funding can be a challenge, especially in medtech. It's very hard. What guidance would you or what actually XO Medtech offer to entrepreneurs trying to secure capital?
Yeah, it's a great question. So specifically on the trying to secure capital piece, I think, you can, I would say getting with a good, like maybe before anything, like getting with a good engineer, like a design engineer that can, really help you move the ball up the court, with, the CAD models, prints, and that gives you the ability to do two things. You can get like really high resolution renders and get videos made, video animations of your solution working, as well as getting quotes. Because I think those two things are important, because you do that work to get quotes, to get the photorealistic renders and some video animations. You can, for pretty inexpensively, completely sell the vision, and you're selling what it's going to be. You can understand precisely how much it's going to cost if you get those quotes. So I think having those two things, I think if you're like very, very early stage, are just really, really critical. I'd say for clinicians that are still that are moonlighting this and they're still working their day jobs, I would just find people that you trust, that can be drivers, you know what I mean? And like, sometimes this isn't necessarily a CEO, but just like really kind of your lead project manager that's driving things forward, that is working with potential suppliers to get quotes, working on the creative side. Like, it's hard to find these folks. The folks at Merge Medical do a great job. Some folks at Biotech Exec do a great job in terms of like placing people and finding people that are a great fit for your project. But I think that's really critical, because like a lot of founders want to try to do it on their own, and kind of go solo for way too long. And it's just so hard, right? And especially if you've got your day job, like you're just going to move so slow. And if you can find someone that has the time and you can work out an arrangement with them, and they've got a high bias to action and can move things forward quickly, I'd say those things are great. I think my last big piece of advice too on the fundraising piece is,
and maybe one comment just to that. I mean, you're completely right. If you're moving too slow, even if you then don't dilute as much and so on, you always have the risk of the market just taking over and being faster than your own development, and then nothing is really won. I think in the end, when you found a company at some point, one of your main priorities should always be to assemble that A team around you. And really, in the end, I mean, the ambition should be that the A team actually is better than yourself. That the A team can eventually do everything you can do and basically replace you in the end. I mean, that's the main ambition. I always say, like, everyone who's an employee wants to make their boss redundant. If you're an entrepreneur, you want to make yourself redundant in order to succeed. That's I think the way forward.
Well, the rate of change and the rate of change and the speed of innovation has increased like pretty drastically over the past couple of years. So if you are not moving quickly, everything around you is moving faster. And like, there may be like, you're making a product that does X, and in 3 years, 4 years, large company just integrated a feature that does X, right? And so you're just hosed. But if you would have launched that product today, you would have had to run 3 years on the market. Maybe they would have just acquired you, right? But the two final points here on kind of the fundraising piece, I would say, not enough founders, I think, give a lot of intentionality to the long-term capital strategy for the business. So, say they're at a point, they did a little pre-seed friends and family, and they're looking at a seed round, right? You need to know precisely what your seed round is, how far it gets you. Then what your Series A is going to be, how far it gets you, the dilution, when you're going to have to refill your equity incentive pool along the way, if you're going to have a Series B, all of these things, right? Because investors are going to want to see that, but it also, like, I don't know how you can really build even your next fundraising round unless you know the full kind of like 5-year trajectory and capital needs. So I think like putting a lot of time and attention and detail into the capital strategy is hugely valuable. And then the second thing is, a lot of people will just kind of like drift or fall into a fundraising round, and then they'll just start reaching out kind of one off here. And like, it's basically just kind of a slow roll into a fundraising round because they realize they need to do it. But before you really talk to anyone publicly, right, about, hey, we're raising money, I think you really just need to huddle up and say, I'm going to put a date in the ground, 3 months out or 4 months out, and treat it like a product launch. Treat your fundraising round like a product launch. I was on a webinar the other day with Jack Kavecki. He runs the Jabroni Capital page. It's so funny, but he is honestly like brilliant with the fundraising stuff. And that was something that he harped on, is like, you have to create momentum, the perception of momentum, fear of missing out, right? Create that FOMO, and create a sense of urgency for them to act, for them to invest, right? Because otherwise there's just no incentive for them to do it now. They'll just wait until you're desperate, right? Or you're more out of money. So I think taking that 3 to 4 months, like put the date in the ground, that 3 months prior or whatever, start getting some press releases together, reach out to groups, try to schedule meetings. Hey, like, do I need to schedule a trip to Boston? Reach out to a bunch of people in that area, right? Try to book 3 or 4 or 5 meetings with VC groups. So really treat it like a fundraising round. Try to create some FOMO. Just be like, yeah, I'm heading over to, Sanford and Sons to go talk to their firm about an investment after this, right? Like you want to be a hot commodity, a hot topic. And you want to sell the vision and create that FOMO. So I'd say those 2 things: capital strategy, as well as like really treating it like a product launch and trying to generate FOMO and momentum.
That's great advice. Maybe at the end, turning the light back on XO Medtech. One last closing question: what's going to be your main focus with XO Medtech over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I'd say we're kind of always and constantly committed to generating great content, and then always trying to kind of serve the community better, like whether it's lessons, events, assets, like just ways to engage, those things, like always committed to that. But we have been hard at work in the background over the past, quarter or two, building medtechvendors.com. It is a B2B SaaS platform where companies can create their company profile, products, and then projects that they're needing quoted, right? From contract manufacturers, CDMOs. And then the vendors are kind of on the other side of that marketplace, right? They have their profiles, but there are directories that exist. I think the unique value proposition, at least one of them with medtechvendors.com, is that we're using some natural language processing. So, and like very rich, well-defined projects that you only make once, right? And then we will match you, really intelligent matching with kind of the natural language processing on both sides for the project as well as those vendor profiles. So we're able to give you a list of matches ranked, by, this is a 98% match, 96% match for your project, for your capabilities, for your stage. And we're able to do that by having really rich profiles on both sides. But because we're doing that, I've gone through the request for quote process and done the vendor management. It's a nightmare. It sucks. You're relying on Google, and Google is not great for long, unique queries, right? That are you need for med tech manufacturing. So we're going to consolidate that. You can kind of one-click request for quote. Vendor gets a peek in. They can see your project details, decide if they want it or not, and then we make an email intro. But it's also, there's value for both sides. It's going to be free for companies to use. So if you are a company that's looking to have things quoted, right? You're building a product. It's completely free for you to use. There's some quote management features. We're going to have data visualization. So you can see lead times, tooling costs, upfront costs, per component costs, right? Across all of these quotes. Some vendor communication stuff that just really streamlines it for you. And then the vendors, it's just going to be like a one-time annual subscription. We're not taking a commission. We're not gouging anybody. We're just trying to create just a really, really valuable platform for MedTech innovators to connect. So that's the biggest thing. We launched a while ago a free MedTech development roadmap. So I just want to plug that real quick. We take a little bit of information and then the magic elves work their magic and spit you out a pretty awesome and crazy accurate development roadmap. So that's what's next on the horizon for us. Just continuing to grow, launch and grow medtechvendors.com and just try to maximize value for as many MedTech innovators as we can.
That's quite a full pipeline. Spencer, it was such a pleasure having you on the pod today. I'm really excited to continue to watch your journey, and let's definitely do that again in a year's time and see how the different projects and initiatives you're driving have developed until then. It was great having you on the pod. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Okay, Med Device folks, picture this. What if you could open up a CRM today and it already contained information for every potential lead for you in the country? And you could narrow down those leads further by looking at billing, location, seniority, so much more. Alpha Sophia is the strategy tool that we wish we had had when we were commercializing a medical device in the US market. But there's nothing stopping you. So visit alphasophia.com and learn more.